Hi, I'm Erica Johnson, filling in for Mark Kelly. Welcome to the program. Well, Canada's had a long and complex relationship with marijuana. To some, it's a criminal drug and a social problem, full stop. To others, it's harmless and it's high time we legalize it. And now, thanks to a new Canadian study, the debate is sure to intensify. The study was published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal. Among its findings, smoking small amounts of pot relieves chronic nerve-related pain. And as an ancillary benefit, the study suggests it helps patients sleep. Dr. Mark Ware was one of the researchers on the project.
Smoking cannabis helps them with pain and sleep and mood, that can be supported by clinical evidence now.
Or seizures.
Conducting the study was a challenge because marijuana is illegal in Canada without a permit. The study required several levels of government approval and took years to organize and complete. Well, for many medical marijuana advocates, today's study only validates what they already know. Jason Reed has had Crohn's disease since he was 8 years old. He's tried a variety of prescription drugs for the pain and at times decided to just live with it rather than the side effects of drugs. That was until he discovered medical marijuana. Now, Reed says pot is the only thing that helps him through the pain. Now, Reed runs Sick with Success, a company that offers coaching and help for those with chronic illnesses. And Jason joins me now. Hi, thanks for joining us, Jason.
Hello, Eric. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. What's your reaction to today's study?
Well, frankly, actually, first I'd like to clarify something about my use of medical marijuana. You're absolutely right that I went through a time where absolutely nothing did help, including other painkillers. I used marijuana for approximately 2 years, and it helped considerably. But I'm not currently using it now, but I do know that it did help me when I needed the help. As far as the study today, there's been study after study, but let's face it, there hasn't actually been much happening. This drug has been around for thousands of years, but from a modern pharmacological point of view, we've done very little with it.
Well, and here is the first study of its kind saying that it can help some people with chronic pain. You've suffered with chronic pain, Crohn's disease, since you were a child. How did you discover that marijuana could help ease some of that pain?
Well, it's actually interesting because I actually came to marijuana somewhat later in life. Growing up, because I was so sick, I was on so much medication that the last thing I wanted to do was take recreational drugs. But approximately 10 years ago, I believe it was a New Year's Eve, I had a couple of people over. I was having a really bad flare-up of my Crohn's disease, and what was happening was I was getting very severe pain. The nausea was really bad. I hadn't slept for a couple days. I couldn't eat. And I was in such a bad state that one of my friends gave me a joint and said, hey, look, try this. It may help. And I thought I had nothing to lose. And I did try it, and immediately I felt several benefits. The pain decreased, but also more importantly, it also killed my nausea, so I was able to eat, and I was able to sleep as well. And that's something that previous pain medications just haven't done for me. I find a lot of pain medication, a lot of opiates tend to make me feel worse in a lot of ways, where the cannabis didn't.
That's right, because critics would say, well, there's a variety of other painkillers out there that you could try. They just didn't work for you?
That's correct. Another big picture thing we have to look at is chronic illness itself, because chronic illness has actually become much more common than we realize. More than half Canadians now have chronic illness. And the thing with chronic pain is it's long-lasting, and it's not like acute pain. It's not like necessarily when you have a broken arm or you have an attack of kidney stones. With chronic pain, it goes on and on. And the problem with that is the morphine-based drugs that they normally give for pain don't allow you to actually have a very decent life while you're taking them. They make you nauseated, they make you sick to your stomach. When you come down off them, you feel terrible. So in some instances, for some people, the marijuana can actually help them function better and actually do things like go to work, have a good night's sleep, be able to eat, that sort of thing.
What do you say to opponents who might say, well, if marijuana becomes more easily available, more people are going to start using it, and that it could be a gateway drug?
Well, I mean, to be perfectly frank, we already have gateway drugs in alcohol and tobacco, and nobody has criminalized them, number one. Number two, I think the other thing to keep in mind is marijuana is already fairly easily available. And the problem with a lot of the marijuana laws we have now is you have to actually jump through a lot of hoops to get legally and properly what you can actually get illegally quite easily. And I think that's a real problem, because if people are getting the drug off the street, they have no idea sometimes what they're getting, what's in it. Whereas if they were able to get something from a doctor, they'd be able to dose it properly, and there'd be so many more advantages to that.
All right, well, we'll be watching to see what impact this study has or doesn't have in Canada. Thanks for your time, Jason.
Indeed, thank you.
Well, pot may help some people get rid of pain, but in terms of politics, it's caused nothing but suffering over the years. Issues of legalization and recreational use are still hotly debated, even though we've come a long way over the past 20 years.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it, and didn't inhale, and never tried it again.
Yeah, right. Nobody really believes that. But the marijuana issue was big enough back then that Bill thought he'd better play it safe. Flash forward to Barack Obama's campaign, however, and the tone was a little different.
Did you inhale?
I was telling somebody asked this question. I said that was the point.
And what about traditionally more liberal Canada? Previous governments tried to relax pot laws, suggesting that as a society we didn't see marijuana, either medicinal or recreational, as much of a problem, at least then.
We will soon introduce legislation to decriminalize possession of small amounts of marijuana.
But here's the thing. While the U.S. at least appears to be getting more easygoing about marijuana, some think Canada's drifting back to a much more conservative position on it. The Prime Minister, at least, is very clear on his position.
I think I've been very fortunate to live a drug-free life, and I don't meet many people who led a drug-free life who regret it.
So, no reefer madness and stoned piano parties at 24 Sussex Drive. But how will Canada define its up and down relationship with marijuana in the future? Well, my next guest is the author of Bud Inc., a book that takes readers inside Canada's marijuana industry. Ian Mulgrew joins me now from Vancouver. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Erica.
Ian, what is the big picture in terms of how Canadians view marijuana?
Well, I think the big picture is a bit of a paradox. I think that a lot of Canadians think that marijuana and cannabis should not be a criminal offense in Canada, but they're conflicted about what it does for their children. And really the debate on drugs in this country is a debate over how we raise our children and the kinds of risks they're exposed to. And so most people, in terms of marijuana, think about it as another risk to their children, and that's been part of the problem around the debate.
But why does this debate continue year after year, and it seems to morph? You know, we've just seen some politicians denying they ever inhaled, others sort of making light of the fact. Wasn't that the point? What is it about pot in particular that makes this drug so controversial?
The law is such a bad law, and it affects so many people. And it makes people uneasy. And at the same time, acceptance of marijuana in the popular culture has grown enormously, and the public policy surrounding marijuana are clearly an abject failure. I mean, you can turn on Bill Maher and see him joking with Brad Pitt about rolling joints at Brad's house. You can see a whole genre of music that is pretty well devoted to the celebration of marijuana. There are fashion houses that design nothing but marijuana clothing. Marijuana is everywhere. And across the U.S. and Canada, we now have many, 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 many people using marijuana to combat the nausea around AIDS treatment and cancer treatment. And so more and more people are learning that cannabis isn't the kind of demon weed that they were led to believe from the rhetoric of the last century.
And yet we've seen in recent polls about 20% of Canadians are saying they want to see stiffer penalties for surrounding marijuana. So how do you explain that? It's not all Canadians that are comfortable with the more lax views of pot.
No, indeed. I think that you're quite right there, that in fact we see from many quarters a heightening of the rhetoric around marijuana and cannabis. But, you know, I think I would draw an analogy to what we saw in Prohibition. In about the final year of Prohibition, we saw the rhetoric around alcohol also ramped up. We saw the number of police raids ramped up. And yet, the prohibition ended within a year, and everyone went on as if life were normal again. I think you may, in fact, see that happen with marijuana, especially in light of what's happening in California and the proposition that will be on the ballot this November.
Well, let's talk about that. In California, they're looking at legalizing marijuana. They're going to vote on it in November. Why do you think that that state has moved in that direction? In the United States, of all places.
Well, California has actually led the way in terms of cannabis. It was the first state, in fact, the first jurisdiction in North America to institute a medical marijuana program back in 1996. And it has been a center for marijuana research and cutting-edge marijuana policy, primarily because of the number of sick people that were within the state and that needed marijuana to combat the effects of treatment of AIDS and cancer and things like that. The state, because of its fiscal problems, has looked at marijuana and the sale of marijuana, which down there is estimated to be somewhere between $7 billion and $10 billion,
wow, big
and said, yes, exactly, and said to itself, we need to tax this. And by the way, we can better regulate it if it's not illegal, and we can probably do better public health campaigning aimed at our children to prevent them from using marijuana in the same way we've prevented them from smoking. All you have to do is look at the public health campaign successes around tobacco, and you realize that if a drug is legal, you can really combat the health risks much more effectively than if it's sold on the black market.
All right, well, we'll all be watching to see what unfolds in California. Thanks for this, Ian.
Always a delight, Erica.
Bye-bye. Well, Canada is one of the few countries to allow medicinal marijuana use. Decriminalizing recreational use is another story. Bill C-17 called for fines and no criminal record for marijuana possession. That legislation died. So where do we stand on the issue as a country? Well, according to a recent survey, 21% say Canada should decriminalize soft drugs such as marijuana. 34% say we should legalize it and tax it like tobacco and alcohol. But 20% take an opposite view. They want tougher penalties for people caught with marijuana.